This is Mick and the Phatman, and we're talking life and music from the 60s through to the noughties. Welcome everybody to Mick and the Phatman talking music, and we are at episode number 15. Mick and I are continuing our work as lockdown commissioners for the Communicable Diseases Network of Australia, assessing COVID lockdown procedures and quality control across the country. We have left the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, and we've headed down to the north coast of New South Wales, Australia. We are currently stationed in two COVID hotspot supermarkets. I'm holed out at Woolworths in Byron Bay, and Mick is a mere 14 kilometres away at Bangalore checking out the Food Works store. Two great supermarkets that have COVID oozing in every aisle. We've been looking at the specials, and Mick has bagged a swag of avocados at only $1.29 each, and he'll be taking those back to Sydney where he'll be able to help millennials get their first home deposit. Meanwhile, over here in Woolworths at Byron Bay, the Urbane Mess Beard Oil 30ml is a hot special, and I'll be bringing a ton of that back to Sydney for all those lockdown hipsters whose grooming is suffering in these difficult times. Mick, are you receiving me over there in Bangalore, and what's happening in the fruit and veg section?
Mate, it's over here at Bangalore. It's just looking just fine. And look, I'm really delighted that they've actually got avocados in stock. I've been recently reading that avocados in Mexico are actually a target of gang lords, in that it's such a lucrative crop. It's worth as much as gold.
Is that right?
Yeah, so they're jumping in, stealing and standing over the avocado farmers and taking all that money from them. So it's great that they've got some here at Bangalore. They're looking really good. I'm
thinking we might not bring them back to Sydney. We might just pop on over to South America with a truckload from Food Works there.
Well, I'm sure we could make a deal.
Yep, that's a great idea. It's really good. Now, just for those who in other parts of the world, and we do have people from other parts of the world who are listening, just to give you an idea of where we are, we're in New South Wales, which is in Australia. New South Wales is around about 800 square kilometres, but only accounts for about 10% of the Australian mainland. New South Wales is a bit bigger than Pakistan and slightly bigger than Texas, but 4 times the size of the UK. So it's a reasonable sized place, New South Wales, and as I say, it's only 10% of Australia. So there's plenty of room for us to wander about the country, isn't there, mate?
Absolutely, and I would suggest that it's probably even 800,000 kilometres squared.
Is that what I did not say? 800,000 square kilometres. That's right.
It's big.
800 kilometres. 800 square kilometres is about as big as Liechtenstein's backside, isn't it?
I think so. Yes. Monaco was what I was thinking of.
Monaco, yeah. What a lovely part of the world. Look, listen, mate. What have you been listening to this week?
Well, again, watching a bit of cable while we're locked down, and a new program came onto cable, and it was called Mr. Mercedes, which is a Stephen King novel, and it was great. And this one, the program has been executive produced by Stephen King, and as I think we've discussed before, he's big on his music. He's a huge music fan. I would suggest he's as big a music fan as we are. But one key song in this show is by the Ramones, and it's called Pet Sematary, which I thought was hilarious to have a song about one King story in a soundtrack for another.
Indeed.
Yeah.
What a great song, eh?
That's right. I don't want to live my life again. And elsewhere on the soundtrack, if you're really into music, you can just watch it with a blindfold on. It's great. Radiohead, R.E.M., Black Keys, Leonard Cohen, Jackson Browne, Randy Newman, the Pixies. That sounds like our forward programming list.
Now, where are you watching this, mate?
It's on one of the cable stations, but I can't remember which one.
Good. Well, hopefully you can put it in the show notes to let our listeners find that show, because it sounds like a ripper.
I think we can, yes.
Excellent. Well, I have been watching, much like yourself, watching a bit of cable TV, and I've been watching the Disney Channel and working my way through Mickey Mouse and all the rest of it. But I did find a show called McCartney 321, with Rick Rubin. And basically it's kind of like Talking Heads, except they're standing around a mixing board and they basically talk about a song, and then Rick will basically go through the mixing board and sort of bring up bits. He'll bring up the bass sound, and then he'll bring up the guitar, and then McCartney's there so going, oh, I forgot we did that. That's good, isn't it? And so it's all the old Beatles stuff, but going through sort of forensically looking at a particular song, like Eleanor Rigby or something. They don't do every single song. I've only watched one show so far, but it's an absolute corker of a show. And for those of you who don't know, Rick Rubin is this very long-bearded gentleman who was pretty famous for producing some of the great acts of the world. Run DMC is one of his big ones. AC/DC, did an AC/DC album. He's done Slayer. He's done Tom Petty. But for mine, he's done the Johnny Cash American series, which has that amazing song Hurt, the version of Hurt, the Trent Reznor song, I beg your pardon, from Nine Inch Nails, and of course that classic Mercy Seat by Nick Cave and with Johnny Cash's renditions of those. So yeah, there's some great stuff on there. And interesting, one of the things that Paul talks about is how Sgt Pepper was in fact the Beatles' response to Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, which was released in May 1967, 26th of May 1967. And on the 4th of June 1967, Jimi Hendrix played the Beatles the ultimate compliment by performing Sgt Pepper, the Lonely Hearts Club Band, the song. He performed it live at the Seville Theatre. And Paul McCartney and George Harrison were actually in the audience that day and thought it was absolutely awesome, and it is awesome. But so it has quite an interesting sort of loops around into different bits and pieces. So I'm looking forward to continuing watching that, mate.
Well, that sounds terrific.
Yeah, it really is very good. So, Mick, I know you've got something rattling around down the bottom of that Globite school bag apart from fruit. So why don't you pull it out and whack it onto the Gourmet Trust tomatoes and tell us what we're talking about this week.
I can do that. Mate, let's open this box. Here we go, Globite. Here we go. Right. So look, this week I think we should talk about Genesis. And at the risk of sparking a fury of opinion, I'm going to say Genesis back when they were at their best, when they were a five-piece band.
It's well, and then they were three after that, though, weren't they? After a while, but
after a while, it was a bit like people jumping off the Titanic. They went down to four, then they went down to three, and so on.
And then they became a pop band.
Yeah, yeah. We can talk about that and compare that to what they used to do very early in the game. But so what else have you got about that?
Well, what I'll go through is I'll just go through some of the chart success that Genesis had, and we'll have a quick look at Genesis and Phil Collins and also Peter Gabriel. But oddly enough, the Australian charts are not exactly renowned for their progressive rock music and all that sort of stuff. But oddly enough, in 1974, Selling England by the Pound actually made it to 57 on the Australian charts and the Australian album charts. And also in 1975, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway also made it into the Australian charts at number 80 with a in there for 9 weeks. So it's interesting. The singles, however, not so early Genesis slanted. It really is the Then There Were Three type period where they actually had 16 singles. The top single they ever had was Invisible Touch, which got to number 3 in when was that? 1986. So there was quite a lot of success for Genesis in the Australian charts, particularly in the singles, but that was really after people like Peter Gabriel and the likes had left. Gabriel, interestingly, had 8 singles in the Australian charts, and also all his albums seem to have made it in there as well. The first album in 1977 was Peter Gabriel got in there, and then 1978, the second album, Peter Gabriel got in there, got to number 50, and the third album in 1980 which was called Peter Gabriel.
Peter Gabriel, just for fun.
Got to 29, and then the fourth album, which was called Peter Gabriel, got to 66. But then we've got a real change. In 1983, there's an album came out called Peter Gabriel Live, and that got to 55, and then following that, there was So, Shaking the Tree, which is just a best of, and then Us, which I know is your favourite. So top of the pops for him, though, was Sledgehammer, which got to number 3 in the Australian charts, which I quite like. I think it's quite a good song.
Wasn't it a fantastic film clip?
It was probably really that stop motion sort of thing, but there was 3 songs off that album which he did a similar sort of thing with the film clips, and they were all fantastic film clips, and really set the countdowns and the like on fire with those clips. Really, really good. And of course, Mr. Phil Collins, as a solo artist, that is. Top of the pops for him was In the Air Tonight, which got to he got to number 3 with In the Air Tonight. And then that great song in 1983, I think you'll love this one, mate, You Can't Hurry Love. What a great song, eh? And
always been one of my favourites.
And then he actually got to number 1 with A Groovy Kind of Love in, what was that, 1988, A Groovy Kind of Love. So that was a top hit there. Got to number 1, 25 weeks in the charts, and he's got 5 albums in the top 100 as well. So I think he did 17 singles though. So as a solo artist and as a member of Genesis, old Phil did pretty well in Australia, as did Pete.
Well, look, that's fair enough too. What's important, we're going to talk about Genesis as far as I and thousands of others consider to be when they were at their best. That really shouldn't be taken as a criticism of Phil Collins or anybody else in Genesis, because one of the things that really is obvious is that they're all excellent musicians. Phil Collins, for my money, and I have actually seen him listed in polls and so on, is probably one of the best ever rock drummers, and we might talk about that a little bit later. And the guys in the band, all, I think I used the word earlier, virtuoso skills. They're just fantastic players, every one of them.
Yeah, they are. And Steve Hackett's a great guitarist, and probably, and when you think about Mike Rutherford, who ended up becoming the bass player and the guitar player in the band later on, I thought, because he has that unique double-necked guitar, which is one is a bass and the other one is an electric guitar. So I've no idea how
Jimmy Page.
He just needs two other arms, and he can play bass and lead at the same time. But I think actually Tony Banks took over a lot of the bass work as they became when they were 3.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, give us a bit of a rundown on who was actually in the band, mate.
Well, Genesis is a 70s band. Early 70s they started, or in fact late 60s, but they're generally classified as progressive. Now, progressive for some people is not necessarily a nice description by bands. It tends to mean complex songs, long songs, a lot of playing, a lot of unneeded complexity, I think, sometimes. Absolutely, yeah, and you can't dance to it, which I don't see as a negative.
No, but I think one of the classic bands for prog rock that is probably the single most difficult band to listen to is Egg.
Yeah.
Or Dog. Is it Dog?
Oh, God. So you've got to be 3 letters, and there's another one called Orb, O-R-B.
Yeah, but Egg is a corker. And I'd strongly advise everybody, if they get a chance to listen to Egg, don't.
Yeah. Save time. It's time you'll never get back.
That's right.
Early Genesis has been described as, and I love this description, it was by a fan, so you've got to take that into consideration. And only recently, in the last in the 2010s, early Genesis has been described as Peter Gabriel dressed in a flower costume, singing 10 and 20-minute songs that sound like excerpts from Gilbert and Sullivan operas as reimagined by Lewis Carroll.
With a lot of a lot of drugs involved.
Well, sometimes you've got to wonder, don't you? Yeah, but yeah, that's from the New Yorker magazine, which the very fact that the New Yorker magazine mentions him at all really is a testament to their longevity and the quality of their music. Yeah, because New Yorker, it's American, and you've really got to. Most music doesn't even get onto America's radar.
No, in fact, particularly New York. Particularly New York, not much gets onto the radar that's not New York.
Absolutely. They started out as a 5-piece band, but by their third album, they'd settled into what's regarded as their classic lineup. Peter Gabriel on vocals and flute. Now, it's interesting that flute, of all damn things, but flute appears in a lot of bands, and the one most readily up for comparison is Ian Anderson.
Yes,
who, from Jethro Tull, who attacked the flute brutally, and
he did. And it wasn't even his first instrument he played. He didn't take the flute up until he was in his teenage years, quite late in his teenage years. So I think he was playing piano or something. I don't really remember now, but it was sort of late. And he was brutal, I think, is the term as a flautist, when he used to do those solos with all that sort of breathing and noises and standing on one leg looking like a pigeon and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was great stuff.
Yeah. Whereas Gabriel playing the flute in Genesis is a lot calmer and it fits in with the overall flow of their music. And in fact, it took quite a while. I wasn't even thinking about it. It took quite a while to realise how many different parts on different albums Gabriel actually played flute on. And it's really nice, a nice difference, a nice change from much of the other music that they play and other bands play.
Did he ever actually do any work on the Celesta?
I don't think so.
Right.
No, but Tony Banks might have, because Tony was on keyboards.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to follow that through one day.
I think we might have to, since the Celesta has become the instrument of choice of this podcast.
Oh, look, I think we'll talk about that for many years to come because of its such significant influence on rock music across the time.
I do think so. Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so
Mike Rutherford.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, let's kick on through this lineup, mate.
Yeah, Mike Rutherford on bass, and you mentioned Mike already. And Mike had some solo success later on with a band called Mike and the Mechanics.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yes. And what was it called? The something years, the missing years.
The missing years.
Something, yeah.
I'm just
it was a little bit poppy, but nothing too bad. Steve Hackett on guitars.
Yeah.
And Steve is one of the best guitar players I've ever heard. He's not aggressive like Richie Blackmore, but he certainly can mix it with people of that ilk. He's certainly not out of his depth, being listed on the same page as Jimmy Page.
Yeah. Which
for my money is a big rap.
Yeah, sure.
For Steve. But what I did find, and we'll talk about him later, is that he was a major influence on the sound. When he left, the sound became more keyboard oriented. So Tony Banks and Phil Collins. So Phil Collins on drums and backing vocals, and again with this is the most complimentary podcast I think that we're going to do. Phil Collins doesn't look out of place on the list of the 10 best rock drummers ever. Phil Collins is so. He added such strength to the Genesis backbone, to their rhythm section. He really, you listen to something like the two albums that we're going to mainly talk about today, Selling England by the Pound and Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And I had my heavy metal friend Ryan from the gym have a listen to some Phil drumming, because all he knew about Phil was the singles.
Yeah.
And that's all a little bit poppy. But then he had to listen to it and he thought, wow, this is really, really good. And he made a comment, which I'm surprised you didn't make, having a bass guitar background, is that Mike Rutherford is also very, very good as a bass player. So Genesis being a progressive band, had this rock solid rhythm section that really gave a driving beat to the band in general. They weren't meandering, they weren't soft and fluffy. They were really rock and roll.
Interesting. I should have mentioned it before, but Mike and the Mechanics also made it into the top 100. And interestingly, Living Years, you remember? In the Living
That's the one,
Years,
yes, yeah.
number one for 24 weeks in the Australian charts. It actually eclipses Genesis, Gabriel, and Collins. So he's actually...
Isn't that fantastic?
That's interesting, isn't it? Like sort of one of the lesser players, I guess, when you think about it, when you think about the front man and where Phil Collins ended up. There he is. He starts up Mike and the Mechanics and gets a number one in Australia in 1989. So good on you, Mike. Well done.
Well, look, that's not a surprise because, as I keep saying, every single one of them is a fantastic musician in their own right. But when they played together as an ensemble, it was just really, really strong stuff. Now, it's possible that a lot of people listening to us today haven't heard much Genesis and haven't heard anything other than the stuff that got played on the radio, which is their when they were a trio, three of them, playing the shorter pop singles.
Yep.
Yeah, you could really do yourself a favour and go back and listen to some of this early stuff. Anything that we're going to talk about today, you really won't be disappointed, and you won't think, Mick and the Phatman are talking through
talking shit.
Talking shit. Well, that's what I wasn't going to say because you're the one who's got the roller's gun mouth on.
I've got the potty mouth, haven't I?
That's right. Yes. So we're not talking rubbish, but if you listen to some of their earlier songs, listen to them individually if you must. We'll talk about Lamb Lies Down on Broadway as a complete work later on, but they're really good playing. There's lots of interesting stuff, and there's no progressive wafting over the fields or lovely quiet stuff as you sit there and meditate. This is all get up and go stuff. It's all really, really good.
Yeah, right.
The band's not dominated by any one member. You know how you see a lot of bands, and I mentioned Deep Purple's probably not a good example because although Richie Blackmore was very, very, very good, the other band members were also very strong. But there are a lot of bands where they lose that one member, they lose everything.
Yeah, right.
So, but Genesis, Gabriel was the front man, and he was very, very strong. But as soon as it became time for a keyboard bit, you'd hear Tony Banks, who is just excellent in anybody's book, and you'd hear Phil underneath drumming really, really well, and the whole rhythm section of Phil Collins and Michael Rutherford. Hey, let's go! And then Steve Hackett plays. Wow, it's really, really good stuff.
I would just say, I was just going to say, just quickly for those who are not familiar with Genesis, is if you are going to start at an album, just start anywhere from Foxtrot above and work your way to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway before you tackle any of the earlier stuff. There's 3 albums before that, but just maybe just maybe those 3: Foxtrot, Selling Eagle by the Pound, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, to ease yourself in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because there is a bit of that flower pot men that the New Yorker referred to in some of their really early stuff. It's arty for arty's sake.
Yeah, I think
great music.
Yeah, I was looking at an interview with Mike and the mechanic.
Yep.
Named Mike, and I think there was a general consensus that Foxtrot was their first album where they really came together much better. They saw the writing was better, because that's one thing to note too. This band actually sat down and wrote music. They didn't just make it up in the studio. They wrote it before they went to the studio as well, which is interesting.
It's because they were all very good musicians and all extraordinarily well educated. It's good that you say that, because Foxtrot really is it's the time that Collins joined and it's the time that Hackett joined. So they're a different band.
Yeah, right.
And, but they're so young. They were all born. Collins is the youngest in the band. He was born in January 51. The rest of the band was all born in 1950.
All right.
So by the time they're recording, this is going through these albums, they're 20 to 24 years old, virtuoso players. Now, it's a really different way of looking at rock music. When you look at people like Bach and Beethoven and all that, they were geniuses right from the start, right? But they did a lot of work all the way through their career, whereas rock musicians tend to do it at a time when people in other careers are just learning their trade.
I was just looking. I can't find any Bach in the Australian charts, interestingly.
Oh, look, it's good. I blame his label. he just didn't go on the right label, and so he never got played by 2SM or 2CH or anybody, so he just couldn't get onto the charts. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, it is a bit. Never mind. Anyway.
There is different eras of the band, and as we've just discovered, the first couple of albums were almost a different band. They did have Peter Gabriel in, they did have Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford, but the guitarist and the drummer left, and Collins and Steve Hackett joined, and they came up with Nursery Crime as their third album. Yeah, and it's got a song on there. The first song I'd recommend that people have a listen to is a song called The Musical Box.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You can just look that up on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your streaming service is. And it's a little bit complex, but gee, it builds and builds and works up until it's Peter Gabriel. It's about a possessed musical instrument. And yeah, it is a bit creepy. It's a little bit weird.
Don't listen to it before you go to bed. You might have nightmares.
Well, it's exactly right. So listen to it early evening, and I think you'll then be inspired to go and listen to something else by Genesis. But listen to Musical Box, and you'll find that it's a little bit sexy because this possessed musical instrument wants to have the young lady that the song's directed at, and I do mean have in the biblical sense. And it's really quite interesting. So people should have a listen. On that same album is Collins' first lead vocal for the band on on one of the lighter songs called For Addison Friends.
Mm-hmm.
You go on Genesis Live. I don't want to do an album by album, blow by blow, so I won't. But even early days, they were really, really very good live in concert. They were tight but exciting. We've talked before about Supertramp, who love their music. One of the most boring concerts I've ever been to because they were just rock solid standing there.
But if one of them had to come out in some sort of bizarre costume, that might have got you rocking a bit, mate.
Well, I would think so. Yeah, if anything. But they might as well have been hologramic projections for all the movement and interaction with the audience. They did.
They never moved. They didn't move actually.
They were rock. Yes, and I don't mean rock in a good sense. I mean rock solid standing there. They weren't moving.
The music was good, though. The music was good.
Yeah. But why would you bother going to the concert when it's exactly the same as your record?
Because we didn't have YouTube back in those days. That's why we did.
Well, maybe. But Genesis moved around a lot. And they had a good relationship with their audience. At the beginning of one particular song, Rutherford knocks a piece of his equipment and prompted a comment by Gabriel to the audience. That was an unaccompanied bass pedal solo by Michael Rutherford, and the audience goes crazy.
They actually did a lot of touring too, didn't they?
They worked hard. Yeah. This is no dilettante band here. It's a hard-working rock band.
Yeah. All right, so we've done Nursery Crime, Genesis. Well, let's move on to Selling English by the Pound, eh? Let's have a bit of a chat about that.
Yeah, there's two albums which marked the high point for mine of Genesis and many other Genesis fans, and these two albums are the last two to feature Peter Gabriel. Right. So the first one is called Selling England by the Pound, and it's very English. Almost pastoral, I've heard it described, in that it covers aspects of England that are very old world and old-fashioned.
Oh, because Jethro Tull used to get a bit of pastoral slogan on them, pastoral and agricultural, I think they were as well.
They did. They're both drawing from the same basic Englishness of their background. And the criticism of that album is that it's too English. They worked hard. You're right, they worked hard. They did a 200-date tour of the US.
Wow. That's a lot of touring.
That's a lot of bloody touring. And whilst they did that, and they were ultimately successful in the US, just because of hard work, not because of any innate Americanism in their stuff. And they had to work hard. Well, when we get to Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, we'll talk about how they made it specifically targeted at the American market.
Okay.
Yeah. So songwriting on this album, mostly by Gabriel, delicate, mythical story elements. There's a song in there which is terrific called The Battle of Epping Forest, which is a suburb of London.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's about criminals. Peter Gabriel read an article about a gang fight.
Yeah.
And extrapolated that out to this great song with all the crims. And we know all of these sort of names because we watch English shows. Right? And they're common on Australian TV, both on cable and free-to-air TV. And so all the names and the nicknames and the whole context. The song talks about East End heroes, and he talks about an extortionist where the shops that need him are those who haven't paid. And one of the heroes, in inverted commas, heroes in the song is Liquid Len of Wine, Women and Wandsworth fame. And Wandsworth is a famous prison in London.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
so there's all these little bits.
Yeah. It's a good song too, actually. And if you didn't know any of that, it wouldn't matter.
Exactly. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, good song.
Yeah. And then you get to probably what I regard as the single best song that Genesis and most bands have ever done, called "The Firth of Fifth," which is a bit of play on the inlet which goes up, which is in Scotland, called the Firth of Forth.
I've been over that.
Have you? Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, it's
very nice countryside.
It's got that nice railway bridge going over it.
Has it?
Yeah, really fancy sort of. Well, no, it's an old steel railway bridge, very commonly photographed. But yeah, it goes
you've always been into railway bridges?
Oh, for years and years and years, and I stopped and I admired it for many hours, and watched the tide come in, and then popped down to Edinburgh for a pint of ale, and gee, wasn't it great?
As you do, yeah. Look, many of the countries that I've been to, I loved Scotland. I couldn't understand a word they said,
no, it's great.
The countryside was beautiful. Yeah.
Well, amazing countryside. I must admit, it is an amazing country and such a little country, but so much jammed into that little sucker. It's quite amazing.
Well, exactly. And none of the members of Genesis were Scottish.
Oh, that's interesting. Did they drink scotch though?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure, amongst other vices, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. No. So the Firth of Fifth was written by Tony Banks in 1972 and came out on the album the following year. It's an ensemble piece. The entire band adds to the song. It goes for 9.5 minutes. And, it's some songs you think, oh, Jesus, when does this stop? But I know you've sat down in recent days and had another good listen to the song, and you're just engrossed in it right from the start, all the way through. There's always something interesting happening.
Yeah, I think I actually did a search on YouTube just looking for the song live, and I found that there's a concert that Steve Hackett did. How long ago was it? 2000s it was, where he brings together a whole bunch of musos and an orchestra and does a whole bunch of Genesis revisited stuff. It's a good rendition of we'll put a link to it in the show notes of that YouTube video of Steve playing that. It's very good, worth having a look at actually.
Yep, exactly. Through the whole song, there's fluid guitar, there's delicate piano and synthesizer parts. There's a bit of flute.
Good.
Some lovely singing, but the lyrics are all a bit House Your Father. They're very pastoral and mythical. Pastoral, the sheep remain inside their pens. And you've got mythical creatures like a unicorn, and you've got knights. And I know you questioned one of the lines that says, "Undinal songs urge the sailors on."
I gotta mention. There's 2 words, in fact 3 words now, because I didn't actually see one of them. That uniform. Uniform. Is it undinal or undine, or I don't know how you pronounce it. Undinal.
Well,
and mandrigal. 3 words I've never.
Madrigal. Yes.
Madrigal, is it? Madrigal, not mad. Yes. Oh, madrigal. 3 words I've never actually seen in a song. I'm happy to be told otherwise, but if anybody's ever seen madrigal in a song other than here, I'd love to hear it. But great. I saw it because it was on the when I was watching the song on YouTube. The lyrics were coming up on the bottom, and I think, madrigal. What the fuck's madrigal?
Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right, and we talked recently about the angels being educated, but Peter Gabriel leaves them in the shade. He is educated up the wazoo.
Do you reckon he was? Do you reckon he was riding with a thesaurus next to him? I would have thought so. You know,
he was writing with a book of mythical history beside him. I think Undinal refers to an ondine or an undine, which is the Northern European water sprite, and the sirens.
Of course, I should have. I don't know why I didn't know that. You know, growing up in the west of Sydney, I thought we would have seen Undinal all over the place. But you know, just bizarre. So what's Madrigal?
There's undines in the Georges River all around the place.
Saltpan Creek would have had them, wouldn't they?
I would think so. Yeah.
And what's a madrigal, whatever it is?
A madrigal, mate, is a musical piece for 4 to 6 voices without any instruments.
Yeah, okay.
A cappella is a good example.
Oh, is a cappella an example of madrigal?
No. Something sung a cappella can be a madrigal because it's just voices. Each singer has a separate musical line, and it all combines together to make a single fluid piece.
Jesus Christ, he jammed
sometimes religious, but generally not back in those days.
He jammed that into that song, Kicking and Screaming, didn't he, eh?
It's all in there, yeah. But you don't need it. If you're interested, you can pick that up. If not, you just let it wash over you, just as another lyric in the song. A unicorn, I don't know what a unicorn is, but I suspect it's a young unicorn.
I have no idea. I've never seen the letters put together in that way before in my life, so I don't know. I wouldn't have even picked it up, except when I was watching it on YouTube. It actually had the lyrics going across the bottom. I would never have picked it up. I saw it and went, I've never seen that word before in my life. And I'm a bit of a hopeless when it comes to the English language. But anyway, it's just amazing.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things in there. Sometimes the imagery can be a bit laboured. Like there's another line in another verse that says, "The mountain cuts off the town from view, like a cancer growth is removed by skill." And I still cringe every time I hear that line. I think, boy, fellas, you haven't covered yourself in glory with that line.
That's a bit of bullshit, really.
I don't know what the relationship between the two lines is. It's supposed to be a metaphor, but it doesn't work for me. But that's life. I have
seen it written that this song has been regarded by many as one of the finest examples of progressive rock.
Yeah, I would have no objection to that description. It really is a wonderful piece. And and listeners, if you get nothing out of this podcast at all, have a listen to this one song. It's Firth, Firth, of Fifth, and you'll thank us. Really, really. Don't worry about the words. The words are fine once you get used to the song, but it's absolutely brilliant. You know, the Collins drumming is very obvious, and although we're talking about a song that, you know, you've heard us talk about these words and so on, the rhythm is driving, and Collins drumming is very obvious and keeps the song moving very strongly. And Rutherford's bass is in there.
And Hackett's guitar solo is awesome.
It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing. It truly is. It really is a very good guitar solo. Very good guitarist.
Yeah. Look, what's interesting is that Steve Hackett, just as an aside, this year there's 2 Genesis tours starting up in the world. They won't get to Australia because we're locked down. But Genesis is doing a tour called The Last Domino, which will probably be a bit of the US and Europe and England. And Hackett is doing Genesis Revisited, which is going to have that song in it. And a whole bunch of other stuff where he's a major feature of Genesis. And I'm really looking forward to it. If the tour goes on long enough, we might get it here in Australia next year. And I'll certainly be going to see the Steve Hackett one. And I think, although I'm not as impressed with Genesis after Peter Gabriel left, I think I'll go anyway just to see the rest of them play. And I don't think Phil drums these days. He's got a couple of neurological issues.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he's in a lot of pain if he tries to hold a drumstick, which is a bit of a shame. But it's all good.
Interestingly, I was just speaking of Phil Collins, I did see an interview with him years ago now where he was talking about Gabriel leaving, and he was sort of saying, to be honest, the band has sort of got a bit shitty with Gabriel because the last outfit that he was wearing which I assume was probably, I'll get you to talk about in a second, the Slipper Man outfit. He said Gabriel had this costume on where the head was so big he actually couldn't lift his body up very easily, and then they were sort of looking at, and as the band were looking, thinking, "Oh fucking hell, what is he doing?" And so I think there was a little bit of tension in the band before Gabriel left, but nonetheless, if as I was saying, if Supertramp had have worn the Slipperman outfit, that would have been good.
It would have been, yeah. And if they had to be lowered, Gabriel had to be lowered into his costume. Costumes on stage. It's just unbelievable. Talk about moving so far from your rock roots. Really big stuff in the costume. I can understand how the band got really dirty with him.
Yeah.
Because the costumes and the theatricals, which just shouldn't be a bad thing, the theatricals got out of control.
What was
overshadowed the musical instruments.
What was the Slipper Man? Did you ever? I didn't really look up much about that bit of it. Do you know what it is?
A Slipper Man is it's on Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and it's a colony of Slipper Men. Oh God, this is going to sound terrible out of context. In fact, it sounds terrible in context. Yeah. Once you go into this strange world, once you go into the world described in Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, you go through a lake in which the lamia live, and the lamia eat your body, and and you come out the other side, and all you are is your bones and your skin.
All right.
And
so you're pooed out as a skeleton.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of thing.
And that's a Slipper Man.
Oh, okay.
It's all a little bit sad, really.
I saw it was like an old live clip of it somewhere, probably on YouTube somewhere. But he actually he's climbing out through what decidedly looks like a vagina.
Could be.
I think he gives birth to himself out of a stage vagina, and then sort of Anyway,
as you do.
Move on.
Now, before we leave before we leave Selling England by the Pound, there's one last song that I should reference, and it's called More Fool Me, it's the first major piece on a well-purchased album where Collins took the lead vocals.
Okay.
And it's a lovely little song. It's again, have a little listen to that one on your streaming service, and More Fool Me, simple song, simple name, and I think you'll be very impressed, and you can see right from the start, Collins was quite good at a rock vocal. I don't know if Studio comes into that category, but we'll see how we go.
Oh,
so,
okay.
leaving Selling England by the Pound, we go to what is often regarded as a concept album in the very real sense. Now, the concept albums, there's been all sorts of concept albums. Some people think that a couple of songs that refer to the same type of thing is a concept album, and it might be if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, right.
The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is an entire double album worth of songs, all telling a narrative about a fella who goes through this dimensional barrier and ends up in this really weird mythical world full of
skeletons,
mythical elements. Yes, and skeleton people like the Lamia, Lilith, the supernatural anaesthetist who's actually deaf.
Say those words again.
The supernatural anaesthetist, and that's probably pinged off people's speakers.
A supernatural anaesthetist who does what? Sorry,
he's deaf.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. You like that?
Once again, a group of words I've never heard put together in the same way before. But anyway, let's move on.
Indeed. And it tells the story about Rail, who's a street kid, and it's very, very American. Where Selling England by the Pound was, as we've discussed, pastoral in English. They made a specific decision to make Lamb Lies Down on Broadway an American concept album.
Okay.
Because you recall we talked about how hard it was, despite the fact that the Beatles made it look easy. It was hard for English bands to make it in the US.
Right.
The British invasion is often touted as if you're British, you've had it made, and that's not really the case. A lot of bands had to modify their product and their sound to make it in the US. A lot of bands, even sadly, Roxy Music, weren't understood by the US market. The US US music fan in the main, and there's always groups of people who are into whatever in a country so big.
Yeah.
But the US market in general likes things simple.
Okay.
So and they like it to refer to home because sort of American exceptionalism is such that if it's got something to do with America, it must be good. So Land Lies Down on Broadway is just chock-a-block full of US cultural references. It starts in New York. The songs, the story starts with Rail doing graffiti in Manhattan. And it references things like Carol Chessman sniffing the air, and you'll recall that Carol Chessman was executed by lethal gas, and so it references the smell of peach blossoms and bitter almonds. Because apparently the lethal gas smells like almonds.
It does.
It references Well, I can't say I smell to myself.
Who's Carol Chessman? I don't know who Carol Chessman is.
Murderer.
Oh, right. Okay.
Who was sentenced to death.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's a movie. Alan Alda played him in a movie about 30 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And he did a good job, but he was executed.
Yeah, fair enough.
Martin Luther King Jr. Who?
I know him.
Yeah, Bing Crosby, Lenny Bruce, JFK.
Yep.
One of the songs in the Fade Out, Gabriel sings "My Little Runaway" in a reference to a song by Del Shannon.
Yeah.
He talks about Howard Hughes in Blue. Yeah, "My Little Runaway."
Let's sing it again. We're good at it.
Yeah.
Howard Hughes in blue suede.
That's a sure way to lose your audience.
Howard Hughes in blue suede shoes. Okay.
Yep. Smiling at the majorette, smoking Winston cigarettes. And Rail, the protagonist of the album and the story, he's a Spanish gangbanger. So they learnt a lot about America on their tour that they did to support Selling England by the Pound. As I say, it was 200 dates, and that's a bloody lot of work.
And did the album perform?
That's a year.
Did the album perform okay in the UK, in the US? Do you know?
Well, encouragingly, but it certainly wasn't the sort of sales that Paul McCartney would consider worthwhile getting out of bed for.
No, that's right. I can imagine.
Look, and this where I talk about the Americanization of content. All these English artists, as part of the British invasion, had to adopt a veneer of American, one way or another, at least make it look like they were American, understood America, wanted to be part of America, and so on and so on. Bowie, we've talked before about Ziggy Stardust. The next album after Ziggy Stardust was called Aladdin Sane, and that really had stacks of American references in there. And there's a song in there called Panic in Detroit.
Yeah.
And he used Mike Garson, who was an American jazz pianist, to give it a whole different, fresh American, if you like, sound.
Yeah.
Elton John, he and Bernie Taupin were just two buffheads from the London suburbs. They lived in a suburb called Pinner.
Right.
They were writing what was hailed as American songs and doing albums like "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player," with a reference to the old Western saloons and everything. Their only experience in America was suburban London.
I was just looking quickly at the US billboards, and they got to number 41 in the charts with that album, which is pretty good for a double. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, 41 in the US, which is a double album as well, which is I think is always a bit hard to sell. So gold. So it got over. They sold over 500,000 copies of that album. So they did all right.
That's big, isn't it? That shows that they got rewarded for actually going out there and letting people see them.
Yeah. So they did all right, that album.
Yeah. Now, and where I say it's not a major success, it made number 41, as you say, in Billboard, and it was number 10 in the UK, but it sold consistently for the last 40 years as a fabulous album. The story is just awesome. The story is it's awesome in so many ways. It's awesome that Gabriel wrote it. It's awesome in the mythical elements that it incorporates. If you like a bit of mythology and horror stories, it's all in there. The songs are simpler by Genesis standards. There's no 10-minute songs about flower pot men, although there are some slipper men.
Sure. Interesting. I just because I'm sitting here looking at the internet because I've got nothing else better to bloody do. There's some bit of Brian Eno on the album.
Brian Eno was downstairs they were at the same studio, one of the big studios,
yep.
and Brian Eno was working on a Roxy Music album. And he wasn't working on a Roxy Music album. He was working on his second solo album.
Taking Tiger Mountain.
Absolutely, by strategy.
Yeah.
And some of the Genesis guys were fans of Roxy Music.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so remember, this is when Roxy were groundbreaking, when they were really interesting.
Yes,
yeah, and they weren't doing John Lennon covers.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's right.
So Collins went down to play because he knew of Eno, and he'd probably met him on the circuit. And Eno, by all accounts, is great to work with. I think we should do a program on Eno one day.
Yeah. No, he's an interesting dude, that's for sure. Yeah. Very interesting.
As payback for Eno's work, Collins went back upstairs and played drums on Taking Tiger Mountain.
That's interesting.
It is, yeah.
Because this is totally out of left field, but we were talking about Rick Rubin before. Rick Rubin actually went and actually started to produce some U2, one of the U2 albums, and they actually didn't get on with him at all. So they turfed him and got Eno back in to do the album for them.
Oh, which one was that?
I got no idea.
Joshua Tree, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. No. But anyway, it's just the circle of life, mate. The circle of life.
Indeed, you've got to be. You've got to get on with people one way or another.
Yeah, particularly if you've got to sit in a small room with them for a long period of time.
Well, yes, and not every producer comes in like Phil Spector and puts a gun on the board and says, "We're doing it my way."
Or else. Yeah, I think. Anyway, different styles. That's all there was to it. Anyway, anything more you want to just let us know about there, mate?
Do you want to talk about what the story of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, without going into it too deep? Gabriel thought it was a traditional concept album. He referred it to Pilgrim's Progress, but instead of the old-fashioned religious connotations, he's got this character in a leather jacket and jeans who these days we call him a punk.
Right.
So Gabriel thought of the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway more as West Side Story than a religious monologue. Oh. So Rails putting graffiti on the walls.
Yep.
And a wall of death is lowered in Times Square, but no one seems to see it. So make of that what you will. He gets sucked into a supernatural world where his body changes. Oh. He meets all these supernatural creatures, and his body starts to fall apart, and with bits dropping off like a leper, and that's when he becomes a slipper man.
Yeah, right.
And the only way he can save himself is to amputate his tackle, which is a really, really sad way of going. So he does that and puts it into a tube, and the song goes, places the member into a tube. It's a yellow plastic shooby-doob.
What the fuck?
And yeah, it's really weird stuff. You know, I'm not sure how much chemical is involved in this writing. And a raven flies down and grabs it and flies away. So half of the story is him chasing this bloody raven.
So he's chasing a raven around to get his dick back.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Which is in a yellow tube.
Yeah. It shouldn't be too hard. One wouldn't have thought.
Jesus Christ, that's fucking weird. That's seriously fucking weird. Anyway.
So they toured this album. It's a double album, so it's long enough to be a full show in its entirety.
Right.
So it's a precursor to, we've seen in the 2000s, and I think I've mentioned it before, we've seen a few albums where people come out and tour their popular albums in full as they were recorded.
Okay.
And they were doing that in the 70s.
Okay.
And the costume changes. It was a huge show. This is a real Broadway type show with the complexity of the production, continual costume changes, and a bit of tension in the band. They had to rework some of the songs and the order of songs to allow these complex costume changes. Right. Gabriel sometimes had a simple mask, but that was at one end, and Gabriel had to be lowered into other costumes. And the rest of the band, rightly, because they're all great musicians, thought that was overshadowing them a little bit.
Look, I'd be worried back at the missing penis, to be honest with you.
It's all a bit sad, really.
It's bizarre. So look, let's just move on because we're starting to get up against the clock a little bit.
Clock?
Just interesting, something that I thought was interesting, that when Gabriel leaves and he embarks on his solo career,
Yep.
I couldn't think of an album less like or a song less like Genesis as Salisbury Hill. It's so different to where he was at the height of Genesis.
Well, exactly, and most definitely, probably in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll do one on Peter Gabriel as well.
For sure.
The beginning of his career is just awesome, and he stripped everything. He just dumped it all in the bin and said, "I'm going to do something different." He worked with Bob Ezrin, who's renowned for Pink Floyd, Kiss, Lou Reed.
Yeah, sure.
So he worked with Bob Ezrin to simplify, and Salisbury Hill is a great piece of music.
Still gets
different to anything. Yeah.
Still gets played on radio today. It's still a great song. Yeah. So it's and just quickly, as I said, we're running up against the clock a little bit. In the Air Tonight, still another one of the classic rock songs of the modern era, and Collins's first big single. Yeah,
it really, if you need of Collins' solo work, that's my favourite.
Yeah, without doubt.
And it really highlights what an excellent drummer Phil Collins was. The song was originally offered to Genesis, and I don't think we need to describe the song itself. I think everyone knows the song.
Absolutely.
It's about 4 minutes.
Yep.
That drum fill, 3.5 minutes into the song, go boom, 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 boom. It changed the perception of Phil Collins from that guy in Genesis to what an awesome drummer and a great solo artist all by himself.
Yeah.
A lot of anger in the song. It was inspired by his divorce. And the sound of that drum, that is the first time the first most successful time up until that point, that the sound, which was called gated reverb, was used. The microphone's placed some distance away from the drum kit or the vocals, so it doesn't get picked up until you get a really loud, strong sound.
Yeah. There was Bowie used that in Heroes, didn't he?
He did, yeah. So and we can be heroes.
Yeah, that's great.
Put emphasis, it picked up more sound.
Yeah,
onto the mics, but it's not invented there. Jimmy Page was using it in the '60s.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And
they used it on Zeppelin, and it enhanced the sound of John Bonham's drumming.
Mm. I want to be John Bonham's Coke roadie.
That sounds like a song we could talk about next episode.
Yeah, and I just quickly, if you want to, listeners, if you want to get onto probably one of the best renditions of In the Air Tonight, hop onto the movie Hangover, where Mike Tyson does a fantastic rendition of the song in the middle of the movie. So keep an eye out for that if you've got time.
It was good to see that he treated the tune the same way as he treated his opponents.
Yeah, with contempt.
Exactly. Well, it's been lucrative for them. Both Collins and Gabriel are worth over £100 million each.
It's interesting. Phil Collins is worth more than Gabriel. I wonder if there's been a little competition as they've moved on through their lives to see who could be richer.
Why not? I mean, you get to a certain point, and it's not hard to get to, where it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Once you got a couple of million of those pounds, you kind of don't need much more. You've got enough to do you. When you get 95 million of them, what do you do with 90? Yeah. What do you do with £100 million?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can buy an expensive car and
a house,
and expensive house.
Yeah, and you can record whatever you like. According to whatever you want, rather than what somebody else wants.
On whatever you want to, on whatever key you want to use, using whatever instruments you want to use, and you still haven't used. If you still only use probably 10 million quid, you still got shit. I don't know what people do with all that money.
Certainly sets up an inheritance for your kids, doesn't it?
Oh, I'll say. Oh, that's probably what you do is breed a bunch of prats because they're entitled little bastards. But anyway, won't go there.
Exactly.
Look, I think we might start winding it up, mate. We're kind of sitting at nearly an hour already, and you've only got into first gear, really, haven't you? Look, I think we're going to bring in a section into the show now. We're just going to hop onto the mailbag and look at a listener's question. And I've got a question here that came from Mons Pubis 68, and they ask, what is Mick's view on the viola in rock music? Mick?
Yeah, look, I might hazard a guess at who Mons Pubis 68 is, but look, like any instrument, it's how you use it and when you use it. I think it's a wonderful. We've talked about this with some of the Velvet Underground stuff.
Yeah,
and I think it's a lovely instrument that really creates a sad feeling to a song. But it's like anything. The Rolling Stones used on Honky Tonk Women. They used cowbell. So it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. Gabriel uses a flute. So there's all sorts of different effects. It's when you use it and how it fits into the overall song.
Right. Would you call it a valid instrument or just a pretentious wank?
I'd consider it just as valid as a cowbell.
Yeah, no, cowbell's good. Cowbell's real good.
Yeah.
And if you get a chance, hop on YouTube and look for search cowbell, and there's a Saturday Night Live sketch of cowbell that's very good too.
All good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I'm going to wind it up. So thanks. That's about all we've got time for now, folks. So thanks for listening. So follow us on Facebook. That's Mick and the Phatman on Facebook.
And
subscribe. And Instagram as well. You can follow us there as well. Hit us up on the email. Once again, that's Mick and the Phatman at Gmail. If you search Mick and the Phatman, Mick, there's lots of Mick and the Phatman on the interwebs nowadays. There's even our podcast is even in places that I didn't even know existed. So Pod Bay. I didn't even know there was a thing called Pod Bay, but our podcast is up on there.
Is that like over the Pod Bay Hell?
I was thinking of Pirate Bay, that sort of thing. But anyway, be sure to check out the show notes because we put lots of links in the show notes for you to go and have a look at stuff. Mick spends, I don't know what, 10, 15 minutes doing them. So, it's
nearly
a lot of effort goes in there. So we'll have links to tunes. We have links to stories, to YouTube, all sorts of stuff like that. As I said, you can find us all over the place. If you just search on Google for Mick and the Phatman, you'll find us on Apple, you'll find us on Spotify, you'll find us on Stitcher, iHeart, as I said, Podbay, even Amazon. You'll find us there. So we're easy to find nowadays. And at the Spotify, you'll find all those suggested listenings as well. So as I said, we'll put into the show notes anything that we need to look at that we want you to look at. In particular, we'll see that concert with Steve Hackett and the Firth Fifth. I beg your pardon. Great live tune there. We also are keen to get your feedback, so hit us up on the on Gmail or mention, hop on, make a comment on the Facebook or Instagram page. You can also write us a review on Apple. There's a few really good ones up there, and we might read out one next time just to make ourselves feel good. So do leave us a nice review and give us a nice mark, maybe 5 stars. Something like that, and that'll probably do us. So good to see you again, Mick, and we'll see you. Well, I won't see you. Probably I'll hear you because we'll be in different parts of Byron Bay over the next day or so, and then we're heading off to other places around the state. So good talking to everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.
Bye now.